Hello guys, thanks for joining me. So I'm going to be here in the woods for the next 24 hours, and in that time I want to try and make myself as comfortable as possible. So I'm going to build some sort of shelter, find food and water hopefully, and also make a fire. So I do have a few survival items with me to help along the way. So I got my bushcraft knife, this metal mug, I've got a steel for fire lighting and some charcloth tinder. Now I only intend to use this as a last resort. I want to try and find some natural tinder here in the woods that will take a spark from the flint and steel if I can. And I also have my folding saw here. Apart from that, all I have in my bag are some extra layers and filming equipment. So let's see how it goes. This is going to be the main support of my shelter, but before I continue with building the shelter itself, I'm going to put some wood down here to act as a bed, because if I don't get myself off of this cold ground tonight when I sleep, I'm going to lose loads of heat to the ground. So I definitely want to build a bed, get above the ground, and then have this shelter to keep the elements off me. As I was collecting wood for my shelter, I came across this, and this is a fungus called the cramp ball fungus, or Daudinia concentrica, and it will hopefully be useful to me later when it comes to lighting a fire. This is sort of the main body complete. Next will be lattice work on top of this, and then insulation, and finally waterproofing to try and keep the rain off if it does rain. going to add these branches onto the shelter, and I'm just going to lay them on and sort of cross them and intertwine them so they stay on. And this lattice work is then going to help to keep the insulation layer on and also the waterproofing. And since the branches are covered in leaves, obviously they will help with waterproofing themselves. So that's going to do for the lattice work. So now what I need is a load of insulation. So I'm going to get a load of this dead fern that's around me and use it to fill in all the holes and just create an entire layer above this stuff. So now I've got a decent layer of this insulation on. So now the last thing I'm going to add is just loads of this leaf litter. So I'm just going to scatter it all over the shelter, and that's going to be my last layer of insulation and waterproofing. And hopefully it will then be able to keep most of the rain off. So that's now looking pretty good. Just show you from the inside, there's not many gaps now. I'm going to try and get a fire going now. I'm going to go and collect a load of firewood, try and get a fire going, and then I can boil water from the stream and make it safe to drink. So this fungus, known as the crempball fungus, can be effective at helping you to light a fire. The Latin name is Daudinia concentrica, and that's because of these concentric layers that it has that form as it grows. Now if you drop a spark into the layers there, it can hold a spark and then transform it into an ember. So I'm going to go around the woods now, try and find some flint and try and find some good material to make a tinder bundle. I'm going to take this with me, as I'm sure it's going to be useful later when it comes to collecting water. So just over on the other side of this stream here, I can see loads of really fluffy reed heads, and they're going to be ideal for my tinder bundle, but obviously they're on the other side of the stream, so I'm going to try and find somewhere where I can cross the stream and go onto that side and grab some of those for my tinder. So I managed to get what I wanted, which were these reed heads. They're really fluffy and fibrous, so hopefully they should be able to ignite into a flame quite easily. So I'm just going to keep them in here. They're a little bit damp, but I'll put them in here, they'll dry out completely and then they'll remain dry. So there's a couple of pieces of flint or chert here, so hopefully I'll be able to break these and get a nice sharp edge that will generate sparks with the steel. And when you're looking for flint or any type of rock that might be useful to you in a woodland, the good places to look are near any water, because obviously streams and rivers can carry stones and gravel along them, and also near animal burrows, because usually the stones are buried within the topsoil, so when the animals burrow and they kick all the dirt out, they can kick out rocks with it. So what I've been collecting here is silver birch bark from this silver birch tree here. Now if you're in a survival situation properly, you'd probably just cut into this tree here and peel the bark off, and that's going to be good to light a fire with. But if you're not in a survival situation, it's not really good practice to do that, because it then opens the tree up to disease and it leaves it vulnerable. So it's okay to take some that's already sort of peeling off naturally and just take that excess bark. If not, try and find a dead birch tree or a fallen branch or something and cut it from that. So when I make a fire, I often like to make a base like this, just so I'm not trying to light it on the cold and wet ground. So I've just been gathering some more material to use for my tinder bundle. Sadly some of this has gotten a bit wet now with the rain, but I'm going to put it right inside my fleece, and hopefully by the time it comes to lighting a fire it'll be nice and dry. So I've got a selection of flints now. I managed to find a couple that are a bit sharper, so let's see if we can make some sparks with this now. So as you saw there, I managed to generate quite a lot of good sparks. So my plan is to drop one of those into the cramp ball fungus and hopefully make an ember. So as it started to rain earlier, I left my mug out in the open to try and gather some rainwater to drink. As you can see, I didn't get much, but every little helps. So it really is the tiniest amount of water, but after being in the woods all day, building the shelter and doing all this stuff, that was really good. So I've got my tinder here. Now what I want to do with this fluffy stuff with the reed heads is really fluff it up as much as I can, make it nice and fibrous so the ember will transfer into this, and then this will hopefully burst into flames. It's not a good sign that some of the fern around here is still slightly damp, so I'm just going to try and remove the damp parts and try and keep the dry stuff. But because there's been rain on and off, most of the stuff in the woods here is now fairly damp, so let's see what happens. Okay, so this is the moment of truth. I'm going to drop some sparks onto the cramp ball fungus here, and with any luck it will generate an ember. So I'm not having much luck with this at the moment. I'm going to try holding the fungus underneath the flint in the same hand, and hopefully the sparks will be more direct going into the tinder. The flint and steel is proving very difficult. I've seen sparks land within the concentric layers here on the fungus, and they just won't turn into an ember. I don't see myself having much luck with this, to be honest. So since the cramp ball fungus didn't work, I'm going to move to plan B, which is to use this tinder that I brought with me. This is char cloth, and as the name suggests, it's just cloth that's been charred. But this should hopefully take a spark a lot easier. Maybe if I continue trying with the cramp ball and just sat here for hours and hours trying to get it to work, maybe it would have, but it would be dark by that point and this wouldn't be a very good video. So I'm going to move on. Plan B, use the char cloth. So the cramp ball is not completely useless to me. As soon as I get this to smoulder, I can try and transfer the ember to the cramp ball as well, because this will hopefully last a lot longer and give me more of a chance of igniting the tinder into a flame. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to try and transfer the ember here to the cramp ball if I can. There we go. So I'm going to get those into my tinder bundle, see if we can ignite it into flame. So now we have fire, and on a cold, damp day like this, there's no better feeling than that. And it's even more exciting because now I can finally collect some water and make it safe to drink. So now I'm going to use the bottle that I collected earlier and my mug to collect some water from the stream here. Now obviously I'm going to boil the water over the fire, and that's to kill the pathogens within the water, but I also want to filter it. So I'm going to take off one of my socks and I'm going to filter the water through the fabric, and filtering it is just going to remove any suspended solids or sediments that I don't want to ingest. Now this is the benefit of wearing an extra pair of socks for warmth. You've also got a portable filter. So I'm going to fill up the bottle, and then I'm going to pour the water through the fabric of my sock into my mug. So my mug will only collect the filtered water, and then that'll be ready to go straight on the fire for boiling. You can pretty much use any item of clothing for this. A t-shirt would do fine, but I wanted to keep my t-shirt on to keep my core body warm. You see the water from this stream is quite murky. It doesn't smell bad, and once filtered and boiled it should be fine. Okay. So now my water's heating up on the fire. The last thing I want to try and do is find some food. So I'm just heading around the woods now, and I'm going to see what sort of plants are around. So what you saw me collecting there is this stuff. It's called jellier, and you might have seen it before. It is used in quite a few different recipes, but it's good to eat. So I'm going to cook this up with some other plants that I managed to find, and then finally have something to eat. So as you can see, my water's now boiling. I'm going to leave it on a rolling boil for about another minute, just to make sure that any pathogens inside there are killed. After hours of no water, there's no better feeling than that. So this plant here is called ground ivy, and this is also edible, so I'm going to collect a load of this. It is good to eat raw. It's not bad, but yeah, there's loads of this all around the camp, so I'm going to collect a load of this along with a load of nettles as well, and then I'm going to boil it all up together and have some food, and then sort of a mixed plant soup. It's not going to be a feast by any means, but it's going to be good to replace some lost energy at least. So the next edible I'm going to try and gather is this thistle here. I want to try and get to the root itself. Now, because it's quite a young plant, this is all it's got in terms of a root, but it's still going to be good to eat. So here we've got some young blackberry leaves. So I'm going to take these back to camp as well. I just went and collected some more water and filter that and then boil it up with some of the plants. So although I've managed to find a few different edible plants, apart from the jelly ear fungus and the thistle root, all of them are just leafy plants, and although they're going to give me some energy and they've got a bunch of other health benefits, they're not going to do much in terms of calories. So I really want to try and find something with a bit more sustenance that's going to give me more energy. So I'm going to head back over to the area of grassland earlier where I collected some tinder, because I saw some cattail plants. Now, most of them were dead, but I'm going to have a look and see if any of the roots are still good to collect. So this here is the cattail. It's quite dead. They're more recognisable when it's more alive, and this looks like a sausage on the top here. But I'm going to dig down and just see if the root is still intact and still good to collect. So I managed to get a decent amount of this cattail root, so I'm going to head back to the camp and get cleaned up. So before I put these thistle leaves into my pot, I'm actually burning off all the little hairs, just because I don't want them to irritate my throat when I eat them later. So thistle is a good source of potassium, calcium, phosphorus and chloride, and it's said to potentially help with some liver disease and indigestion, and it's also loaded with antioxidants. Jelly ear, or wood ear as it's also known, is a good source of copper, which can help with heart health and lung function. And it also contains a high amount of antioxidants and polyphenols, which can reduce inflammation. Stinger nettles contain vitamins A, C, K, some B vitamins and a load of amino acids. It's also said that they may reduce inflammation, and some studies have said that they can lower blood pressure. Ground ivy is a good source of potassium and iron. They can potentially reduce swelling, and they're also said to help with coughs and some mild lung problems. Something else I want to build before it gets too dark is a fire reflector wall. And that's basically a wall that's going to be the other side of my fire to reflect the heat from the fire back into my shelter. So to make it I need 4 stakes. So I just cut this piece of sycamore and I'm going to start cutting it into stakes now. I have some of this jelly fungus. This is some of the ground ivy. So the ground ivy when it's raw is quite bitter, but cooking it takes that sort of bitterness away. So to cook these cattail roots, all I'm going to do is lay them over the fire and roast them. I'm just going to roast them until they're black. So this one of the cattail roots is done. So I'm just going to split it open like this with my knife. And then expose these fibres in the middle. And this is the part that I'm going to eat, so I'm just going to take those fibres out with my teeth like that. I've think this one's a bit overcooked. Okay. So that's the good stuff in there, all those white fibres. Well, these are full of starchy carbohydrates, so they really are an ideal survival food. If you gather enough of these, they can obviously replace all the calories and the energy lost from building your shelter and making fire and all the tasks that you have to do in a survival situation. I've now got this broth made from all the plants earlier. I'm gonna leave the food for now, go on a hunt for some firewood and build the fire reflector wall. So now that I've got the stakes in, all I'm going to do is put wood down it like this, and I'm just going to build it up. And I can put any type of wood in here. It doesn't need to be dry wood. I'll keep the dry wood obviously for the fire, and I'll just shove any wood in here to build it up, and that's just a barrier to then reflect the heat from here back into my shelter, just to try and do everything I can to stay warm tonight. So before it gets too dark, there's one more thing I want to do. I've got with me this trail camera, so I'm gonna go not too far from camp, and I'm gonna set this up and see if any wildlife is around near the camp. So I'm inside my shelter now, sort of using my bag as a pillow. It is a very tight squeeze in here, but that should be good in terms of warmth. Right now I am very warm, but I doubt that's going to continue throughout the night. But hopefully, if I keep feeding the fire with wood, it shouldn't be too bad. The reflector wall seems to be doing a good job, so yeah, at the moment I'm nice and warm.
now 5:20. I'd say I've probably had about 4 hours sleep. Every time the fire burned down, it started to get quite cold, so I definitely needed the fire. I'm going to try and get about another hour's sleep.
So I've made it through the night. I think I'd definitely be lying if I said that I slept well. The bed obviously wasn't that comfortable, so there was a lot of moving around and trying to find the most comfortable position. And I did find that every time the fire died down and the cold really hit, that's when I woke up. So it's a good job I had a lot of wood, managed to keep the fire going throughout the night. So I just collected pine needles, and I'm going to use them to make pine needle tea, which is really high in vitamin C, so good for the immune system. It's also high in vitamin A, and it's said to help with a sore throat and congested chest. So that's the end of my 24 hours in the woods. I'm just going to enjoy the last bit of the fire before I head home. So thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you on the next one.